Hello everybody and welcome back to the Logan Blackman Show YouTube channel. It's been a long time since you've seen my beautiful face on this camera. The last video that you saw my face was actually the NFC season preview, which we did all the way back in September. Now we have been fairly consistent in regards to uploading videos, but it's just been audio because I've been recording the podcast, taking out the section from the quarterback prospect rankings and just uploading them to YouTube. I greatly appreciate everybody who checked those out. Make sure to check out the blog posts as well because those are where the real effort goes into places, those blog posts, especially that final quarterback prospect ranking. So I greatly appreciate if you guys went to go check that out. But first, we have to check out this. This is Mock Draft 1.0. Obviously, the NFL season just ended on Sunday with the Philadelphia Eagles beating the absolute piss out of the Kansas City Chiefs. 40-22 was the final, and to be honest, it wasn't even that close. It was just a good old-fashioned butt kicking. The Chiefs' offensive line was massively overthrown in that game by the Eagles' defensive line. The offensive line for the Eagles is just so freaking massive. And Jalen Hurts, apart from that gross interception of Brian Cook earlier in the game, had a great game. Cooper DeJean, Odebo's own, also had it pick 6 in the game as well. So everything you could have asked for the Philadelphia Eagles standpoint happened in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs had a chance to go for the three-peat. It didn't end up happening. Now we got the Eagles as world champs. I know that's going to be a hot button issue around social media, or has been a hot button issue since the Super Bowl happened. It's just crazy to think about where they were at the beginning of the year. Like, you talk about what Nick Sirianni's future was after week 4. He was one of the coaches that was one of the betting favorites to be fired first in league. Obviously, that ended up being Robert Saleh, but Nick Sirianni was not far behind. So to go from that to end up being Super Bowl champions, I just got to give a round of applause to him. The defense was great throughout the course of the year. A lot of great young players on this team, like Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat. Cooper DeJean got a pick 6 in the Super Bowl. Quinyon Mitchell was also great throughout the season. Like, this was just a great Eagles team. In the offensive side of the ball, obviously had Saquon Barkley, the biggest offensive line in Super Bowl history, which when they flashed that graphic of the average size of the Eagles offensive line versus the average size of the Packers offensive line in Super Bowl 1, that was kind of ridiculous because I think the Packers offensive line average was 6'3", 245. Now that's a very good NAIA triple option offensive line, but for today's NFL, you're good to find a middle linebacker that's that big. So yeah, it's just a completely different era. But again, congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles on winning the Super Bowl, second one since 2018, I believe, as well. And a lot of their success is derived from them taking advantage of the draft process, like with players falling right into their laps. You see players that, like Nolan Smith's a prime example. I don't know if you guys remember, but prior to the draft, people were talking about him being a top 10 pick. He blew up the combine. He didn't end up going to the 30th, 31st pick in the draft. Like, that's the kind of things the Eagles get away with in the draft. And we're going to see if that happens this time around because this is obviously Mock Draft 1.0. Make sure to check out the blog post down in the description below, and also make sure to check out all the different links to the social media and podcast links down below as well. And yeah, I'm really excited for this. So in front of me right now, I've got Mock Draft Database. So we're going to go through each pick. I've already done the mock draft and everything, so this is just going to be me kind of going through each pick and why I picked them. So if you don't want to read or you don't like reading, then you can just listen to my beautiful voice go over each and every single pick. So let's just get right into it. So we're on, again, Mock Draft Database. Let's get this bad boy started. So number 1 overall, the Tennessee Titans. A couple directions they could go here because obviously the VP of Player Personnel, I believe it was, said that they're not going to pass on a generational prospect. So that leads a lot of people to believe Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter makes perfect sense because out of the top quarterbacks in the draft, in Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, no one really views them as generational prospects, good players, but not necessarily generational. So if you had to choose between those two guys, I would personally lead Travis Hunter in regards to what the Tennessee Titans want. Because if you remember last year, head coach Brian Callahan talked about how he wanted to add some explosiveness to the receiving room. And Travis Hunter, obviously, wide receiver / cornerback in college, Heisman Trophy winner, arguably the most explosive player in the entire draft process. But in the grand scheme of things, the most important position on the football field is quarterback. The Titans obviously fired Rand Carthon this offseason as well, so they're bringing in a new GM. I would find it hard to believe at this point in time, could be very wrong about this, but I have a very hard time believing that you would fire a GM and bring someone else in if you weren't going to draft a quarterback. Again, I could be reading that completely wrong. And then if you look at Brian Callahan's relationship with Will Levis throughout the course of the season, it was very rocky. Levis got benched a few times throughout the year, memes galore, which were fantastic for us fans, but for the Titans, that was not really what they were expecting when they drafted him with the second overall pick in the second round. I see what I did there? So I think the Tennessee Titans are going to go quarterback here, and I'm going to go with Cam Ward. Cam Ward's been my number 1 quarterback in the draft process for a while now, and I think you can make arguments for either him or Shedeur Sanders. I think what Cam Ward does better than most is be able to make plays off script. Sure, they can get into trouble sometimes because you see him roll outside of the pocket and try to force things down the middle of the field. We saw 2 interceptions like that against Cal and Duke throughout the course of the season. The Cal one obviously ended up being a pick six. And the hero ball aspect is something that's going to have to get coached out of, and we saw that a little bit more at Washington State than we did this past year at Miami. But Cam Ward's got a very strong arm. He's, again, great at making plays off script. He's super calm in the pocket as well. Like, all the traits you want in a quarterback for a team that's not very good, especially along the offensive line. Yes, they've made good draft picks in J.C. Latham and Peter Skoronski, but overall, the O-line definitely still needs some work. I think having a quarterback like Cam Ward back there will be awesome for them moving forward. I think he'd fit what Brian Callahan wants to do as well, even though apparently he did compare Shedeur Sanders to Joe Burrow. So take with that what you will, but Cam Ward, I think, is the best quarterback in the draft, and I think should go number 1 overall to the Tennessee Titans. At second overall, the Cleveland Browns, we're going to have them taking Abdul Carter from Penn State. The Myles Garrett trade situation is something to keep an eye on. Now, we've seen players make trade requests that end up not getting traded, but that looks very unlikely at this point in time. And there's some really big edge rushers this offseason that could be moving on. Like, you look at Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati. Like, there's some big-time edge rushers that could be moving on. So the Browns are trying to do their best to maybe hold on to just a Hall of Fame edge rusher, one of the best defensive players in the league. So having a guy like that on the edge is massive, and losing a guy like that on the edge is even more massive. So you need to go into the offseason and replace him with a guy like Abdul Carter. It's kind of like what the Rams did last year when Aaron Donald retired. They drafted Jared Verse and Braden Fisk in the first 2 rounds. Like, you're not going to replace a guy like Myles Garrett like that. It's not possible to do that, but Abdul Carter's a great way to start. I know there's going to be some people that say quarterback in here as well with the whole Deshaun Watson thing, but I think at this point in time, I think edge rusher, best player available strategy for the Browns will be the best thing for them moving forward. So I'm going to go Abdul Carter. The Giants, we're going to have them taking Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. So 2 of the first 3 picks in the draft are the quarterbacks. And Shedeur Sanders, again, is my QB2 in this draft class. In regards to like what he does compared to Cam Ward, he's super tough. He's taken some massive hits throughout his time in Colorado. The one against Kansas, the one that people point to the most. He's very good at rolling out to his left, which is something not a lot of right-handed quarterbacks are great at doing at this point in their development. They usually get better with time, but Shedeur Sanders is very good at making plays to the left. He's not necessarily a plus athlete. He doesn't necessarily have the biggest arm in the world, but he can make all the throws across the middle of the field. He can make plays outside the pocket, and he's able to stand calm while there's a defender barreling in on him. Like, Colorado had 0 rush attack this past season. So what they did was basically just run a shit ton of bubble screens. Like, their run offense was bubble screens. That was all it was. Like, to have that kind of tweak to your offense, I think definitely helped Shedeur Sanders as the season went on. But obviously, the bowl game wasn't great for him against BYU. A couple interceptions in there, but made some good throws throughout the course of the game despite the interceptions. But yeah, the Giants are not in a situation to pass on a quarterback. Tommy DeVito's the only quarterback technically on the roster because he's an exclusive rights free agent, but Drew Lock's gone. Tim Boyle's gone. Daniel Jones obviously got cut midway through the season. They need a quarterback. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll are on their last legs. They cannot afford to pass on a quarterback here. I know there's going to be some people like, oh, well, Drew Aller would fit really nicely in what Brian Daboll wants to do on offense, but I don't think if they don't get a quarterback here, or if they don't ace a quarterback in this draft, they're not going to be around next year, because I don't think the Mora family are going to be really content just sitting around watching the middle with as bad as what they've been. Now, I could see a reality in where they go with like Travis Hunter here, and they take someone like Jackson Dart later. I would not be shocked by that at all, but at this point in time, I think there's going to be too much pressure from up above to draft a quarterback that they go with Shedeur Sanders here. And they've been linked since the freaking bowl game, so it's not like something that's completely out of the blue here. But Shedeur Sanders going to the Giants here at 3. Number 4 is Travis Hunter. Offensive line's the obvious pick here. I mean, Will Campbell, it feels like a Patriots-type player. Like when Belichick was the head coach / GM, the Patriots prioritized the offensive line. Like, you look at some of the key players that they had throughout that Brady era, they always made sure the offensive line was at least intact. I'm not saying it was the greatest offensive line in the league throughout his time there, but they always made sure to address the offensive line each offseason. With Vrabel coming back, with the point of attack being on the run game, one would assume, protecting Drake May is key, especially with the Patriots' horrific offensive line. But if Travis Hunter's available, I don't see them really passing on Travis Hunter for Will Campbell, because Travis Hunter can do so many other things for this team. Because we also, with Drake May, offensive line's big, but you need to get some weapons for him outside as well. Like, Kayshon Boutte was nice throughout the course of the season. Demario Douglas was also there, but they just need more weapons for Drake May to work with. Drake May had a great rookie year, given the context of everything with how bad the Patriots roster was. He ended up making the Pro Bowl, which, take that with a grain of salt. Pro Bowls right now really don't mean a whole lot, so take that with a pinch of salt, but I thought he played great. given, again, the circumstance, the running ability they had, the arm strength that he had, like, he did a lot of good things for the Patriots to look at and go, okay, he's our guy for the future. Now we just got to build around him. And Hunter, you can play him at wide receiver. We talked about his explosiveness in the first overall pick. And then you can also play him at corner opposite Christian Gonzalez, who's a great player in his own right as well. So I think the Patriots right here, if Hunter's available, you take him. Or maybe even Abdul Carter if he's available. Mason Graham could be an option here as well. But unless one of those guys is there, Will Campbell would only be the option if the first two guys I mentioned weren't there. That's what my take would be right now, so I would take Travis Hunter at 4. Number 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars going Mason Graham. Liam Cohen's a buck. I mean, he was only there for 1 year, but that mindset with Tampa Bay, with Todd Bowles and how they built that team comes from the defensive line and the defensive side of the ball. And you got Josh Hines-Allen, you got Travon Walker there as well, Eric Armstead. Like, you've got the piece of a solid offensive line, but you need that other piece next to Eric Armstead. And Liam Cohen talked about how physical they want to be on the defensive side of the ball. I wouldn't be surprised they went Ted McMillan here to try and get the best again out of Trevor Lawrence. Brian Thomas went off last year. Obviously, still have Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk, but can they be healthy for a remainder of the season for an entire year? I don't know. So Ted McMillan would also be an option here. Will Johnson to get someone opposite Tyson Campbell, but that physicality and adding that extra piece to the defensive line and disrupting the quarterback, I think would be massive. And Mason Graham does that and more for this Jacksonville Jaguars defense. And I think that's to the dismay of the Las Vegas Raiders, who sit there at number 6. So I think their 2 players that they want are both off the board in Shedeur Sanders and Mason Graham. But we're going to go Will Johnson here. The Raiders got Pete Carroll as a head coach, defensive-minded head coach. Spytek, which is a very ironic name for the GM Tom Brady chose to hire for the Raiders, coming from Tampa Bay as well. They're going to want to establish the defensive side of the ball. Max Crosby's still there, but Lord knows what's going to happen the rest of this offseason. The Raiders' defense in general was like pretty middle of the road, given the fact that Crosby and Christian Wilkins both missed time. But they're going to want to keep building around that. I know you could go like McMillan here because the Raiders don't really have a great option out wide. Quarterback's a massive need here as well. But if Shedeur Sanders is the dream here for the Raiders. I mean, Tom Brady's praised him in the past. He's mentored him in the past. So that's like the obvious fit here. But if he's not there, I would imagine with Carroll and Spytek, they're going to want to address the defense. Pete Carroll being a Legion of Boom guy, Will Johnson right there, given that true alpha in the cornerback room. You saw what he did at Michigan. He's a bigger corner. Just overall time, we saw multiple pick sixes this last year. It's kind of like the Derek Stingley thing, if you remember that from a few years ago, where the entire draft process leading up was that, oh, we don't know about Stingley's injury history, and then boom, 3rd overall pick in the draft, now one of the best cornerbacks in the league. I'm not saying Will Johnson's Derek Stingley, but he would definitely give the Raiders that alpha in the secondary, especially when the division with Bo Nix, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, like with quarterbacks like that, you're going to want to secure the secondary. Will Johnson be a great move in that direction. Next on here, quarterback's going to be an interesting topic here with Aaron Rodgers' future and major question right now. Apparently they're planning on drafting a quarterback in the first round, but I don't really see there being one right now that you would take at number 7 with the 2 guys already off the board. So I would go with Will Campbell. Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith are both free agents and on the wrong side of 30 and both missed time last year. So them coming back, I don't really see as likely. They drafted Olu Fashanu last year at 11th overall, which I thought was a very nice pick. And Will Campbell, there's no problem of double dipping in the draft. There's no issue with that at all. Aaron Glenn was coming over from the Detroit Lions, came from a team that was very physical along the lines, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. I know he's a defensive guy. So like Mason Graham next to Quinn Williams would make people drool. Like Will Johnson would also be an option here in the secondary to pair with Sauce Gardner. McMillan to replace Devontae Adams, who seems like he's going to be leaving this offseason as well, would also make sense. But it all starts from the offensive line. I think that's what Aaron Glenn took from Detroit and is bringing that to here. And I think Campbell and Fashanu would give the Jets 2 bookend tackles. Now, there has been some talks about him playing guard at the next level because of his arm length situation, but he had no problems with that at LSU. I think that's starting to become less and less of a concern as time progresses, but Campbell was elite at LSU. I think he's the best offensive tackle in this draft, so I think the Jets, if he's available, if the Patriots don't take him, I think the next logical place would be the Jets here at number 7. And the number 8, the Carolina Panthers. McMillan would be an option. I know we brought up McMillan pretty much every single pick since pick 5, but he would be an option here. He's the number 1 receiver in this draft, unless you're including Travis Hunter in that conversation. But the Panthers, you look at like Leggett, Thielen, I think Jalen Coker's the other receiver on the roster. They only have 3 receivers on the roster. Leggett showed some signs last year, but you're going to want to continue to add more players in that receiving room. Bryce Young showed massive strides after taking over his starting job after getting benched early in the year. So we're going to want to see him grow, and to build him, you want to be like, okay, well, we're going to get weapons around him. But the Panthers' defense sucks. It was the worst defense in pretty much every statistical category last year. So it would make the most sense to me to go after one of the top defenders here. And though there's going to be conversations around like the different edge rushers in this class and who's higher to the ones, but I'm going to go Michael Williams from Georgia here. Kind of like Trayvon Walker to a certain extent with regards to the size, length, athleticism, all that great stuff, ceiling-wise, super duper high going into this draft. So he didn't put up like insane production this past year, but the Carolina Panthers, that ceiling is really big. You look at Xavier Legette as well. He only had 1 year of production out of South Carolina. He was a little bit older, but they're banking on him continuing to develop in the NFL. It kind of goes into that category as well. You even look at Jonathan Mingo, who they drafted when they drafted Bryce Young first overall from Ole Miss. That one didn't end up working out, but that's the kind of players they seem to be targeting in the draft. Obviously, Bryce Young was not that. If that was the case, they would have probably gone after Anthony Richardson at that point, but Williams would give them that piece along the edge and hopefully improve their defense. They got some decent players on the defensive side of the ball, some good players like Derek Brown, really good player, J.C. Horn, good player. Like, they've got good players, but overall as a unit, they're not great. So you're just going to keep wanting to build piece by piece, and Michael Williams, with his ceiling, with his length, size, all that stuff, you could definitely build something here. And the Saints at 9 will end up suffering here. Tet McMillan going number 9 to the New Orleans Saints. Kellen Moore coming in as the OC, played against Derek Carr while they were at Boise State and Fresno State, and Kellen Moore absolutely wiped the floor with Derek Carr in that game. So I'm pretty sure that's going to get brought up a few times throughout their time together in New Orleans. I like the hire. The Saints are a weird team because they're just so void of talent. Like, their offensive line's getting better. There's some questions there. I've heard some things about Trevor Penning and his future there. They drafted Talisi Fuaga last year in the draft, which I thought was a very nice pick at that point. But you look at the defensive line, Cameron Jordan's getting older. Mickey Loomis has always targeted the lines. So, like, Michael Williams would make a lot of sense here for New Orleans, especially since Cam Jordan's getting older. But the receiving room, it's Chris Olave, and then that's pretty much it. And Chris Olave has battled concussions throughout the course of the season, so you'd think that they'd want to add some more weapons around Derek Carr, whoever the hell their quarterback's going to be this next season. And McMillan, 6'5", like 210 pounds or something like that. Giant catch radius, really physical wide receiver. Not necessarily a big burner or anything, but that would give you a nice compliment to Chris Olave on the outside. That would help the Saints push forward and give them that influx of young talent that they are desperately in need of. And then number 10. This is not a difficult pick. It's more of just, not the position's not the problem, it's the player, because the Bears are going to draft a lineman. One would assume it could be Ashton Jeanty. I wouldn't be shocked if it was Ashton Jeanty, to be honest with you, but the Bears need to figure out their offensive line. They definitely need to figure out their offensive line. Whether it's Tyler Booker from Alabama, who would slot right in at guard, or Kelvin Banks, who a lot of people consider to be the second best tackle, or even the best tackle with his athletic ceiling in there. Josh Simmons, because former Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren is a part of the Bears staff, so maybe they want to target some Big Ten players. But his injury that happened in that Oregon game, the first Oregon game, that's going to leave some question there, but a high ceiling from Josh Simmons, just a matter of where he goes in the draft. He could definitely be at this spot, but I'm going with Armin Membo from Missouri, a right tackle in college, but he has the versatility to play pretty much everywhere along the offensive line. So if you want to play him at left tackle or right guard or left guard, whatever, he's not going to play right tackle. Darnell Wright is going to be that position moving forward, but the other positions, barring center, Membo could slot right in. I've seen him listed at different heights. I've seen anywhere between 6'3" and 6'5", but unlike Campbell, the arm length is not really an issue here for Membo, but he's super powerful. He's got a very high ceiling, very high motor as well. And Missouri running a more run-based offense, I think, would fit to what the Bears are going to want to do with Ben Johnson. They're going to want to add another running back in there as well to pair with DeAndre Swift. I've heard people talk about Travion Henderson in maybe the second round here, but at this first round spot, I think you have to get an offensive lineman, and Armin Membo, to me, is probably the next best tackle after Will Campbell, but that versatility is so key to where you can put him in at guard, you can put him in at tackle, you can keep Braxton Jones at tackle for now, but if he starts to struggle, you slot him, Membo, over to tackle, and you can go from there. Tevin Jenkins is also a free agent, so if you want to keep him at guard, so you can do a lot of different things with Membo, and I think he'd be the most ideal pick here for the Bears. 49ers at number 11. A lot of people are going to talk about offensive line, and rightfully so. They struggled a lot on that unit last year, and the weapons around Brock Purdy and just the offense in general struggled, and Kyle Shanahan being an offensive guy, it would make sense to continue to strengthen or try to strengthen the offensive side of the ball, especially with Deebo Samuel potentially getting traded. That's going to be something to look out for. But you look at what John Lynch has done throughout his time as GM of the 49ers. They have usually always addressed the defensive line, whether it be Nick Bosa, whether that be Solomon Thomas. Sorry, there's people shoveling outside. I'm a little bit. It snowed like crazy here, so I'm a little distracted here. But you know what I'm saying? Javon Kinlaw, DeForest Buckner. You could go on and on with defensive players the 49ers have targeted early in the draft. And with Robert Saleh coming back as the defensive coordinator, I think they're going to go with an interior D lineman or edge rusher here, which is a big need for them. Not just because of John Lynch's previous history of doing that, but it's a big need for him. So I'm going to go Walter Nolan, who was blowing up the Senior Bowl. Absolutely blowing up the Senior Bowl. Really athletic from the interior defensive line as well. He's got good size, good explosiveness in there. I think he would fit in very nicely along that defensive line because they tried to replace DeForest Buckner with Javon Kinlaw. That didn't really work out. Kinlaw ended up going to the New York Jets. Maybe this is the guy to add into that middle of the defense that could make them elite once again across the defensive line. But Walter Nolan definitely could go higher than this as well. It wouldn't really shock me at this point if he went higher. Number 12, the Cowboys. I mean, the most natural pick is Ashton Jeanty, right? I mean, he's a Texas native, or he moved around a lot, but he ended up playing high school in Texas. He's one of the biggest names in the draft, which is kind of crazy to say about somebody coming from Boise State, but you look at the numbers that he put up this past season at Boise State, like the near record-breaking numbers, nearly passing Barry Sanders to the single-season all-time rushing record, getting Boise State. And when I say dragging Boise State to the third seed in the college football playoff. Of course, they lost to Penn State in there. He finished second place in the Heisman Trophy race as well, which a lot of people didn't really like that too much. They weren't really big fans of that, but Jeanty fills a need for the Cowboys. I know Rico Dowdle ran for 1,000 yards last year, but it's kind of a similar situation of James Robinson and Travis Etienne, which a lot of people at the time didn't really like. Fair enough. Or even like Trey Mason and Todd Gurley. I know Trey Mason didn't rush for 1,000 yards his rookie season, but they ended up drafting Gurley anyways. Jeanty would just be a difference maker for this offense and give them that other weapon next to CeeDee Lamb, next to Dak. And even if you still want to play Rico Dowdle, you can use him as a third down back as well. You have option here with Brian Schottenheimer coming in as a head coach. Just as Schottenheimer, they want to run the ball. And so you could potentially see a Tyler Booker here from Alabama to fill in that guard spot with Zach Martin's injury history. Maybe they go that direction. But Jeanty fills an immediate hole for the Cowboys that would definitely get Cowboys fans excited for the upcoming season because there's not really a lot of excitement going around their fan base right now. But the Dolphins at number 13, I'm going to go Kelvin Banks from Texas. Safety is an option here. You look at Javon Holland and Jordan Poyer, both potentially leaving in free agency. Poyer's 33 or 34 years old, something like that too. So you definitely want to get a little bit younger at that spot. But you could go with a Xavier Watts in the second or third round later. Second round. But you could go that direction later. But the main concern is protecting Tua. It just is. But the offensive line's been kind of a revolving door these past few years in Miami. And Kelvin Banks, looking at what Texas did, they do a lot of similar things to what the Miami Dolphins use, especially when in regards to utilizing their running backs. You look at Blue and Weisler down at Texas. You could do that with Achane and Raheem Mostert down in Miami. They utilize their running backs in multiple different sets, and Texas ran that quick style of offense as well with the crossing routes, quick throws, and stuff like that. Very similar to what the Dolphins ran. And Kelvin Banks could slot in at guard, could play tackle, doesn't really matter, but he's a very athletic tackle as well. There's some people questioning him in regards to how much hype he's getting, but in regards to natural fit, Membo would be a great fit here as well, given Missouri's zone sets on blocking. But I think it would be very nice to see Kelvin Banks go here to the Dolphins at 13. I think it's just, a very natural fit for them. And you look at the Colts at 14, it just has to be Tyler Warren. If he's available, you got to take him. You're trying to get the best out of Anthony Richardson, not the only way, but one of the easiest ways to do that is get him a reliable target at the tight end position. Tamale Cox is fine, but that's about it. Tyler Warren is close to an elite prospect from the position. He could do almost everything he wanted on the football field. There was against USC, he snapped the ball and then caught a touchdown from Drew Aller, and he put up 230 yards receiving in that game as well. He finished 7th in the Heisman Trophy race. He won the John Mackey Award. He can do literally everything for your offense. He's 6'6". He's a massive human being as well. He would just fit this team and give them that other option and a nice safe pair of hands for Anthony Richardson to hopefully continue to develop him here. But I could also see them going corner here. I've seen people talk about Will Johnson potentially falling here. Jahdae Barron from Texas could be an option, but if Tyler Warren's available, the Colts have to take him. They have to. And at 15, the Atlanta Falcons, we're going to take him Jaylen Walker. This could be a little bit later than what a lot of people were expecting from Jaylen Walker, but the questions about if he's an off-ball linebacker or if he's an edge rusher, no one's really nailed down a real spot for him, which could be a good thing for him. But if you're looking at him as an edge rusher, he's not necessarily the biggest guy out there. He's about 6'2", 245, something like that, like the Green Bay Packers offensive line back in the day. But great player. Great player while at Georgia. Super disruptive, super fast, super twitchy. He can do a lot of different things from either the edge rusher or the linebacker spot. But given that's the Falcons, they'll probably go with the receiver. If Tyler Warren's available, they'll probably go with the tight end here. So the skill position here is probably going to get targeted. Since Terry Fontenot's been the GM, it's been Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Michael Penix. So who's the fifth guy here? Luther Burden? Maybe. Tyler Warren? Maybe. So look out for that as well. So it might be stupid to say the Falcons need an edge rusher or are going to take one, because they need one every year. But this is the year they're going to do it. They're finally going to take an edge rusher. But the Arizona Cardinals at 16, we're going to take Mike Green. Like we talked about with Walter Nolan, absolutely blowing up the senior. He had insane production. He led the nation in sacks this past year. I believe he had 17 sacks. And for the Cardinals, who are going to want some help along the defensive line because they have, they put up decent sack numbers as a team, but I don't believe anybody on their team had more than like 6 sacks this past season. Like, they need that extra boost of production. They drafted Darius Robinson in the first round last year, but he battled injuries. I believe the death of a family member in there as well, so he missed significant time last year and significant time period of development. But for Jonathan Gannon, you look at what happened in Philadelphia. They prioritize edge rushers. They prioritize the defensive line, like we talked about earlier with them winning the Super Bowl. You would think they're going to want to continue doing that here, and Mike Green just seems to be going up draft board. Super explosive. Again, dominated the Senior Bowl, has the production to back it up as well. So if he's available here at 16, I think he makes the most sense for the Cardinals in this spot. And then the Cincinnati Bengals, we're going to continue the edge rusher train. Shamar Stewart. The Bengals defense just sucked last year. Lou Anarumo, kind of the scapegoat, getting fired this offseason. If you can make a real case that he was the best coach on that coaching staff. Like, I don't know if that's crazy to say or not, but him getting fired was kind of like, ugh. I mean, you lost a lot of key defensive players. You didn't really do anything to replace them. You're so high, tunnel vision on getting the offense good, you didn't even worry about the defensive side of the ball. And the Bengals, like, you look at Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase put up insane numbers this past season. Joe Burrow led the league in passing yards and touchdowns. Chase won the Triple Crown, and they missed the freaking playoffs. Trey Hendrickson had a great year along the edge, but as a unit, the Bengals defense sucked major ass, and he's another guy that we talked about earlier that could potentially be traded this offseason. Shamar Stewart is someone that can play defensive line or the interior D-line, can also play on the edge as well, like an athletic freak. Like we talked about Trayvon Walker before, he's kind of in that mold as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Shamar Stewart went further up the draft board than this. He might be the second edge rusher off the board after Abdul Carter. He's not passing Carter, but if we're talking about like the Mike Greens, the Jaylen Walkers, the Michael Williams of the world, Shamar Stewart could definitely be that category here as well. They're just going to want to continue to improve that defensive side of the ball, and with Al Golden coming in, this just makes a lot of sense for them moving forward. And then Seattle at 18, Tyler Booker from Alabama, which is kind of funny that Ryan Grubb's now fired because now he's the offensive coordinator at Alabama, but his previous coach, Kalen DeBoer, who he was with at Washington, coached Tyler Booker down at college. So you're like, oh, the connection there with DeBoer and Grubb, and then get him to Seattle and all that stuff. But then McDonald fired him. And if you listen to McDonald talk after the firing, it wasn't really about Grubb as a coach. It was more about the mentality of what they wanted to do on the offensive side of the ball. Because McDonald's a defensive-minded coach. He wants to run the football. And they have good running backs in Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, but they didn't really have the line to do that. They threw the ball well. Jackson Smith-Njigba had a very nice year, but Mike McDonald wants to run the football. He wants to do that. He was in Baltimore, they ran the football a lot. He was at Michigan with Harbaugh, they ran the football a lot. So he wants to do that, and to make that better for the Seahawks, you have to continue to improve on the offensive line. Guard's not a sexy pick in the draft by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an immediate need for the Seattle Seahawks. Fills a gap here. Membo would be an option here as well because Abraham Lucas's injury history and question at the right tackle spot, you could slot him in there, but I don't really see a world at this point in time where he's available. But Booker would slot right in the guard, and he would instantly shore up that run offense, and you would open up so many other holes in the passing game as well. So I like this pick. I like this pick. Obviously, I made the pick. But I think this is a good pick for Seattle. Definitely improves their offensive line, which they're a major need for them. The Buccaneers at 19, we're going to have Godod Campbell from Alabama. Vontae Davis is not getting any younger, and he's also a free agent as well. And Todd Bowles, and being the defensive coach that he is, and the Buccaneers, like we talked about before, trying to prioritize the defensive side of the ball in these high-value picks, they're going to want to try and get a guy to replace him, but it's not as easy as just replacing a guy like Vontae Davis. You can't just go out there and get any linebacker. You got to fill the leadership category as well, and Godod Campbell has been praised numerous times for his leadership abilities while at Alabama. Tough tackler in there as well. In the middle of that defense, they could still bring back Vontae Davis. Like, it wouldn't really, or Levante David, sorry. But I think having Campbell there would give them that next step up, like a very natural replacement for David at that linebacker spot for Tampa, which I think fills, again, an immediate need for them. Wide receiver is going to be an option here as well, with Chris Godwin, I believe, is a free agent. Mike Evans not getting any younger either. So receiver could be an option here, but I think linebacker is a massive need here, and I think that fills here with Godod Campbell, especially from that leadership category. I think that's a big thing here for the Buccaneers. But number 20, the Denver Broncos, Colston Loveland. He's not like the big physical presence that Tyler Warren is, but in regards to being a receiver from the tight end spot, he's a very, very good receiver. And the Broncos had very limited production from the tight end position this past season. Look at Adam Troutman from the tight end spot. He had, I think, less than 150 yards receiving or something like that. And with the way Sean Payton utilizes tight ends, it would make sense for them to try and bulk up that position. Now, receiver could be an option here as well. Burden is available here. I think that would add a little bit more speed to the offense as well. Pair him with Troy Franklin, add some more speed there. Cortland Sutton's future seemingly always in question, so you could go with the receiver there and not think twice. But again, with how Sean Payton utilizes tight ends, I think tight end would be a very natural slot here for Denver. The pain of the Chargers, big at 22, who I'm sure Harbaugh would love to have a guy like Colston Loveland, he coached at Michigan. We're going to go Loveland here to Denver at 20. And 21, Pittsburgh, we're going to go with Emeka Egbuka. I know a lot of people would look at Luther Burden potentially being the next best receiver in the draft, but Emeka Egbuka just feels more like a Steelers player, if that makes any sense. Like, he's not necessarily an absolute burner on the outside. He's a little thicker. He's about 6 foot, 200 pounds, but Ohio State would utilize him in those jet motions, utilize him in the slot a little bit. He made some big catches throughout the course of the season. Everybody always points to Jeremiah Smith. Everybody pointed to Marvin Harrison Jr., but Emeka Egbuka is no slouch either. I think that's got to be a little bit talked up more, how good Emeka Egbuka was while at Ohio State. Tough as hell receiver, can make all the tough catches. And the Steelers' connection with Ohio State, it just feels like a natural fit. And receiver is a big need for them moving forward as well. So they could go Luther Burden. They could go Matthew Golden here from Texas as well. But Egbuka, again, with the run blocking, I think is also key here. Very good run blocker as well. That toughness pays in at that as well. But I think he fits naturally with what Pittsburgh wants to do. And I'm going to have him going here at number 21. And 22, the Chargers. Receiver is definitely going to be an option because they need more weapons around Justin Herbert. Colston Loveland, I think, would have been a dream pick here. But we're going to go with Kenneth Grant from Michigan, another Michigan guy. We talked about the connection with Jim Harbaugh with Loveland. We do that with Grant. And Harbaugh called Grant a gift from the gods. Like, the dude is an absolute behemoth in the middle of the defense, where everybody looked at Mason Graham, and rightfully so. Dude's great. But Kenneth Grant was no slouch in his own right as well. Can make plays in the passing game, but is a big presence in the middle of the defense that can stuff holes in the run game as well. We know Harbaugh wants to address the trenches. They drafted Joe Alt last year in the first round. That worked out worked out really well. So I think they continue that trend here, just going down that Harbaugh route, and you're just addressing the defensive side of the ball. And the Chargers defense was great this past year. They were very good defensively, but adding a guy like Grant, I think would only elevate them on the defensive side of the ball, because they don't have those great, got Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa on those guys as well, but Khalil Mack's future in question. Grant's not playing edge rusher. I'm not saying that, but you look at the D-line, that's definitely an area to improve upon. It may not be priority number one, but with Grant available and that connection to Michigan and Harbaugh's love for addressing the trenches, I think that's the most likely fit here at this point in time, if Loveland's not available. But the Packers at 23, we're going to go with Jahdae Barron from Texas. Can do everything on the defense side of the ball. Won the Jim Thorpe Award this past year. Can play nickel, can play outside corner as well. Similar-ish mold to that of Brian Branch from Alabama, who's obviously with the Detroit Lions right now. But the Packers seemingly always have questions around their cornerback room, and Jair Alexander's futures, again, seemingly always in question as well. And the Packers love themselves some SEC players, and I think Jahdae Barron would slot right in either at nickel or at the outside corner spot. You're going to get edge rushers here as well, but I don't know if there's any real toolsy guys that the Packers would look to, because the Packers are very peculiar when they look for edge rushers. They got to be a similar mold of edge rusher. So like a Shamar Stewart would make a lot of sense for Green Bay, but I don't really see a reality in which he's available. So Jahdae Barron, you draft him here, you slot him in the secondary. Maybe you can hold on to Jair Alexander if you trade him or whatever. His injury history is also a big category as well, but we're going to have Barron going to the Packers at 23 and the Vikings at 24. Corner's massive. The secondary is massive. I mean, you look at all the players the Vikings have in free agency. You look at Harrison Smith, Cameron Bynum, Stephon Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, Byron Murphy, Fabian Moreau. Like, all these guys are free agents this offseason. They're all free agents. They're going to bring some of them back, but you look at the likes of Gilmore and Shaq Griffin, they're on the wrong side of 30. So cornerback would make a lot of sense. Thomas from Florida State would be a very natural fit here. He's a guy that you would look at and see, oh, that's the kind of corner that Brian Flores would look for. But I'm going to go with the defensive line. Like, they had a good defensive line record last year. They were really solid against the run, but Harrison Phillips, Jerry Tillery, Bullard, they're fine, but you could definitely upgrade on them. And with Bullard and Tillery both being free agents, you could slot someone in there in this first round. So corner may be like that you look at and go, oh my God, you need to draft a corner. But Derek Harmon from Oregon is the best player available for what the Vikings need. So I would go Harmon here. He can make plays in the pass game, has a big body as well, 6'5", 310 pounds or something like that. Was part of arguably the best defensive line in college football. Like when you talked about Oregon, yes, you talked about the speed on offense with Dylan Gabriel, Tez Johnson, all those guys, but their defensive line was so freaking tough to break down, and Derek Harmon was the main cog in that defensive line. So I think with Minnesota, again, with Bullard and Tillery entering free agency, with all the needs of the secondary, I understand, and the Vikings aren't really sport for picks here. They don't really have a ton of picks in the draft, but I would go Harmon here over Thomas. Those would be my two picks I was flipping back and forth on, but I went with Harmon over Thomas at the end to fill in that need on the defensive line. The Texans, guards, massive. You look at that game against the Kansas City Chiefs, they got beat up in that game. Guard is a massive need. You look at Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. You look at Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. Both left tackles, but both expect to kick inside. As possible as those picks are, I am going to go with Luther Burden here. You look at Tank Dell and his injury. Last year's the broken leg. You got the destroyed knee this year. Stephon Diggs is good as gone this year. And Nico Collins, great receiver. Don't take anything away from Nico Collins. But I would believe the Texans will want to continue to add more weapons around Stroud with Diggs leaving. I saw something, I could have read this wrong, but I think I saw some like DeAndre Hopkins maybe come back. I might be making that up. I don't remember if I saw that or not. Maybe I did make that up. But Burden would add that extra burst to this offense. He's not necessarily the most physically imposing guy. He's like 5'11", about 200 pounds, something like that. But he's an absolute burner on the outside. And I think it was a little bit disservice to him this year how Missouri utilized him in regards to how they ran. They were more of a run-first team, and Luther Burden's stats definitely took a hit because of that, but he would add so much explosiveness to this Texans offense. Yes, again, offensive line's a massive need, but I think you could address that a little bit later. And Burden is, again, it's kind of like the Vikings situation. Like, the best player available that if in a need, it may not be number one need, because you could say the offensive line's the biggest need, but out of the needs that the Texans have, out of the best players, Burden's the best player, so I would go Luther Burden there at 25. Number 26, the Rams. We're going to go with Josh Conerly from Oregon. A lot of people look at Josh Conerly and go like, well, he got blown up by Mike Green in the Senior Bowl, so he's going to fall very far in the draft. But he was a great player for Oregon last year. Like, he's not like a super duper great athlete or anything, but he's a very solid player at the tackle spot. And I believe he was voted the national team's offensive lineman of the week or something at the Senior Bowl. Like, the one rep went everywhere. Like, when you get blown up like that in a rep, that's going to be the talking point of the entire thing. But he made up for that more and more throughout the season, throughout the whole process. And you look at the Rams, they made great strides on the defensive side of the ball last year. They're a very young team on the defensive side of the ball. Offense is still a little bit older, and I think you could replace one of those tackle spots. I think Alaric Jackson's a free agent. I think Hartenstein is a free agent as well. Havenstein, however you say his name, is a free agent as well. So filling in that tackle spot and that West Coast thing, that's what I'm viewing it as. Like, you see these kind of teams pick regionally. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed thing, but I think like it's a natural fit. Oregon to LA, it just fits here in my head. I do apologize for that. But yeah, I think he'd fit into what, you look at what Oregon did, I think he'd fit into what Sean McVay would want from an offensive lineman at the NFL level. So I'm going to go with him at 26. The Ravens, offensive line's a big need. Tackle's an option here, but I'm going to go with Malachi Starks, which could be insane that he's this late in the draft because he's a great player. You could talk about him being a top 10 player in the draft. You really could. Or top 15 at least. Like, he may not have had the insane production that we were expecting going into the year, but from a leadership standpoint, from a versatility standpoint, from just an overall player standpoint, he could easily go to the Dolphins at 13. I would not be shocked by that at all. We brought up the Dolphins' need for a safety, but the Ravens, they've talked about one of the first things they mentioned in their postseason press conference was wanting to use Kyle Hamilton in more of a free role, and they don't really have that safety on the roster that could, give Kyle Hamilton that freedom, and I think Malachi Starks could do that. And the Ravens' pass defense was horrific at the beginning of the year. It got better towards the end of the year, but they definitely want to keep improving that defensive side of the ball, especially in the secondary. They drafted Nate Wiggins last year. Kyle Hamilton's been awesome. Maybe a corner here. Thomas, again, I'll bring him up from Florida State, could be an option, but I would go with the safety. Malachi Starks, again, one of the best players in the draft. If he's available, I think the Ravens have to take him. Off the line again, Josh Simmons is still available, but I would go with him at that spot at number 27. You look at the Detroit Lions next. We're going to go Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. He may not be the biggest guy in the world. He's at 6'2", kind of like we talked about with Jaylen Walker before, but massive amounts of production. 16.5 sacks or something this past season for Boston College, right behind Mike Green for the national leader in sacks this past season. But he's another guy that we've talked about, like Green, like Walter Nolan, who absolutely blew up the Senior Bowl. He's another one of those guys that's in that category, and the Lions are going to be looking for someone to partner Aiden Hutchinson. Yes, they got Zadarius Smith on one side, but he could bounce to a new team in no time at all. Like, I think we've seen him play for the Packers, Vikings, Browns, and Lions in the space of like a day. That's what it feels like anyways. And you could get younger at that spot as well. And the Lions just battled a shit ton of injuries. And the edge rusher position next to Hutchinson would be massive. And he's a very explosive player as well as great bend in there as well. One of the best bends around the tackles in the draft in regards to that spot. So I would think if we're looking at a guy to partner Aiden Hutchinson, Ezra would fit very nicely there. Washington at number 29. We're gonna take them Matthew Golden from Texas. You look at their current roster, their only receivers are Terry McLaurin and Luke McCaffrey. Those are the only receivers they have on the active roster right now. Offensive line's a massive need for them as well. You gave up 50 sacks this past season to a very mobile quarterback, but a lot of that can tone down to the fact that the quarterback's moving around too much in the pocket. Sacks aren't all based around the offensive line. And you want to look at the big needs for Washington. Maybe you would go offensive line first, but receivers a massive need with Cliff Kingsbury still there as the OC. I'm sure he's going to want to add more weapons around Jaden Daniels. And Matthew Golden, super competitive, super confident receiver. That was shown in the Ohio State game, I believe, where he had the nonchalant one-handed catch along the sideline. That's just a very confident player. Tough as hell player as well. Again, like we've talked about a few other receivers, not the most physically demanding receiver of all time, but again, he would fill a need for the Commanders, and I think it would give Jaden Daniels a very nice option on the outside to pair with McLaurin and McCaffrey there as well. Number 30, my Buffalo Bills. Could go a few different directions. Defensive line's a massive need. I think that's the biggest need for the Bills this offseason. Tyreek Williams could be an option. TJ Sanders from South Carolina could also be an option. Joshua Farmer from Florida State could be an option. But we're actually going to go with Nick Emmanwori from South Carolina. Absolute massive dude at the safety position. 6'3", like 225, 230 pounds or something like that. Could play the linebacker spot if you need to. Could play as a bigger nickel. Can play as a safety as well. He can just give you so much versatility from that safety spot. And you look at the Bills secondary. Christian Benford was great, but you look at the safeties with Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin, who's a free agent this offseason. Can you count on them moving forward? Long-term options at the safety spot? I don't know if you can. And when you look at Sean McDermott's priorities in the defensive side of the ball and look at his history as a coach, he's always looked at the secondary first. You look at what he did in Philly, and you look at what he did in Buffalo when he first got here. They prioritized that with Trey White, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, and Rapp and Hamlin did good, given the expectations that people had on them. But Taylor Rapp battled a bunch of injuries this year. Hamlin didn't want to hit anybody, and I think Emmanwori would add that element to the Bills secondary, add that versatility in there as well, give him that physical presence, because there were moments in time where it looked like the Bills didn't want to tackle anybody. So I think adding that piece to the secondary would be massive for them in getting back to, not just to the AFC Championship game, but potentially getting over the Chiefs and getting to the Super Bowl. And speaking of the Chiefs, I'm going to go Josh Simmons from Ohio State. There's a very good chance that he's not available here. Very good chance. He's one of the best tackles in the draft, but the injury against Oregon is going to be something to watch out for. But the Chiefs' big need is left tackle. I mean, you kicked Joe Thuney out to tackle. He's an all-pro guard. He's not a tackle. He was good at tackle. He held his own at tackle, but times he was exposed in the Super Bowl against the Eagles, especially against the speed rushers and Josh Sweat and Nolan Smith. He just couldn't handle it. If you kick him back inside the guard, it'd be fine. But that tackle spot needs to be addressed. And I don't know if the Chiefs will necessarily do this, because if you look at their draft history, they tend to draft defenders. You look at their defense, their starting defense, apart from two players, and Justin Reed and Drew Tranquill, their entire defense was drafted by them. Like, they prioritized the defense in the draft to just go, hey, Mahomes, do your thing on offense. We'll get the defense all sorted out. And it's worked beautifully for them up to this point. But that left tackle spot is a massive need for them. Like, even on the right side, Juwan Taylor's a walking 5-yard penalty at least. And Josh Simmons has experience playing at the right tackle spot as well. So whatever side you wanted to play on, he has that athletic ability to play both sides. And I think it would be an excellent addition for the Chiefs if he's available. And then the final pick, the Philadelphia Eagles, we're going to give them James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee, a leaner edge rusher, about 6'5", 240 pounds. Not necessarily the same as Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith's a little bit shorter, if I'm not mistaken, but that would give them an extra speed rusher there. Josh Sweat is a free agent this offseason, and James Pierce could be that guy you sit and develop for a year, because the Eagles are very good at doing that. They always plan a year ahead. That's what it seems like. They draft a player, have him sit, the guy leaves, and you go up. Like, you look at Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, look at Jason Peters, Andre Dillard. I know they didn't work out. Jordan Mailata, thankfully, was right there. Jalen Hurts, Carson Wentz, even that situation you could look at. But the Eagles are very good at doing that. And I think adding a guy like James Pierce would give them that extra speed rush on the outside. Bryce Huff didn't work out this past season, but Josh Sweat, if you bring him back, and even with Brandon Graham there as well, you can have James Pierce learn behind him. You could gain strength this offseason as well, and he could develop into a really good edge rusher for the Eagles moving forward. And that is Mock Draft 1.0, ladies and gentlemen. That is Mock Draft 1.0. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Again, make sure to check out the link in the description, or all the links in the description. Make sure to check out, Mock Draft 1.0 on the LoganBlackmanShow.com. You can scroll down the main page or go to the blog section and click the link there. Or again, just go down in the description below. I'd greatly appreciate that. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did not, I sincerely apologize. It was nice to get back in front of a camera for the first time in a long time, since September, I believe, again. But yeah, hope you enjoyed. If you didn't, I sincerely apologize. Try to be better next time. And I will see you guys later. Peace.